So yeah, so again, it's a thrill for me to be in here as a longtime career CIO and CTO across many big brands, and you heard one of them: T-Mobile, Cricket, Dish Network, early cable company. Actually, other than my family, I also spent 5 years early on at Apple before Apple was really cool. So have that going for me, right? But yeah, this is really an interesting topic today, and something that I'm sure we're all going to be faced with, and I think we're going to come out of this just a lot smarter about some really great tools and technology here that Boomi can provide us. So with us today, we've got Mr. Mike Bachman. So there's Mr. Mike Bachman and Mr. Sean Aker. So there's Sean, and so yeah, guys, it's just really great to start this off with just a quick introduction, and maybe if you have one slide, you could show the studio audience a little bit about who you are. And by the way, if you're a kind of a 70s, 80s rock band aficionado like I am, I have to say that I kind of was teasing Mr. Bachman about Bachman Turner Overdrive, and he knew the band, so I'm really thrilled about that. So, Mr. Bachman, welcome. Good to see you today, and I'll turn it over to you for a little intro. You and Sean can introduce yourself, and then give us a little view of the Boomiverse.
All right, that sounds good. And Rob, it's good to hear your voice again, and we're going to take care of some business, and you ain't seen nothing yet. So we'll extend the metaphor a bit.
Touche, my friend.
Right. So my name is Mike Bachman. In the industry, I go by my last name, so you might hear others just refer to me as Bachman. But anyway, I run our strategy for emerging tech and sustainability for Boomi. So we'll get into what Boomi is in a second, but I've been in the office of the CTO either at Dell Technologies or at Boomi now for almost 12 years. And we do a lot of innovative things here. So with regard to any type of emerging tech, like how does Boomi fit with artificial intelligence, blockchain, edge-based computing, RPA, anything like that, my group is what really looks at all of that. And then from a sustainability perspective, we're also here to look at how technology can work in areas of sustainability and how we can incorporate sustainability into tech. So those are the areas that I'm chiefly focused with. Sean?
Yeah, hi, Sean Aker. I'm a senior solution architect here at Boomi. About 17 years in the supply chain and supply value space. Very heavy technology and technical background, working with technologies like API and EDI, and really coming up with ways to innovate around how we take our supply chain, how we take our custom integrations, how we take our technologies and put them together. And my job is to make that straightforward. And I always say that my main goal is to make life an integration experience and make it easy to use and easy to deploy, right? And that's really what I'm all about. So really here to help, and we'll see what we can do. So thanks, Bachman.
Yep, you bet. And Rob, do you want me to just share a little bit about what Boomi is, where we came from, that?
Yeah. I mean, look, you guys have just an amazing history of the company, and you're sitting really at the crossroads, which in so many now areas, and we'll see this, I think, when you kind of start walking us through the solutions. But yeah, if you can, give us a little thumbnail on the company history, and then if you have just a couple of slides to start the conversation going, that'd be great.
Sure. So hopefully you can see something that resembles a Boomi environment.
Looks good.
Got it. Right.
We'll just put that as a backdrop for now, and I'll get into a little bit of what that means in a second. But let me give you a history of Boomi. Boomi is a transliterated word from Hindi, but it means in Hindi earth. And so what Boomi really started out as was a company that was built to service retail integration back in the early 2000s. And what started out as a couple of professional services folks trying to make service-oriented architecture real, as an integration for various retail companies, has grown into something much broader. And what that growth really looked like is as the cloud natives began to come online and really when the web was a place where instead of going to once a day, where you would check your email or go in and look at FTP drops or pick up files in some way, shape, or form, and it became more of a way to sort of build applications. Kind of the need to have more and more integrations became prolific, not only within an organization, but then across organizations as well. So EDI was a big spot for Boomi early in its infancy, and then it just sort of grew from there. Once WebScale came along, there was a little company that is, it's now a SaaS provider that you've all heard, that's a household name for contact relationship or customer relationship management. And this particular company, along with other SaaS-based applications, began to really take off. And Boomi hitched a lot of its early tech to those particular types of companies. And so since those companies were built on top of platforms that they created in cloud-native environments, the idea with Boomi was to create an easy-to-use design time and an easy-to-deploy runtime that allowed for the integration of all of these different endpoints, regardless of where they're located, whether they're on premises, in a cloud somewhere, talking to a SaaS application, which is also in a cloud. And the idea is to be able to integrate anything, anywhere. And that sort of grew and grew and grew at web scale. And what happened was Boomi actually was the first to market and really create this market called integration platform as a service. And so the idea was that as these platform-based economies or these platform-based applications and services began to sprout up all over the place, and as web-based technology from hyperscalers such as AWS, GCP, Azure, Baidu, Tencent, all of that came to be, more and more applications developed their own platforms on top of these infrastructure platforms, and the need to connect these different endpoints began to really take shape. And then throughout the early teens into the late teens and today, what we're seeing is this explosive growth in web-based technology. And so Boomi has always been designed to where you can simplify the centralization of the design, the deployment, and the management of any type of integrations that you would have for a back-end business process, but also a low-code way to integrate all of these different endpoints into what could be a service, an application, anything that's basically cloud to cloud types of approaches. And when I say cloud, I also include on-premises, SaaS applications, any cloud natives that you build yourself, and any endpoints that you want to expose. When you have these different endpoints together, regardless of where they're located, if you can centrally build them and deploy them and manage them, and reuse the components that you build for other integrations, it creates a speed for design time itself. And so Boomi is this cloud-based design time that's really this multi-tenant sort of design time where you can build any type of process you would like, connect any type of endpoint that you want, and create any type of data flow that you want from point to point. And whether you're talking about traditional patterns of ETL, whether you're talking about nuanced patterns of ELT, point-to-point connections, one-to-many types of connections through PubSub or event-driven architectures, Boomi can plug into any of those types of environments and that type of enqueuing or dequeuing in from point to point. And so we can, especially in any type of industry, including but not limited to retail, you can connect into any type of data generator or any type of data actuator, source or sink. It doesn't really make a difference. And Boomi is there as the integration circuits for what you would need to be able to connect those data sources and sinks. So I'll pause there and see if we have any questions, see if that all makes sense.
Yeah, very, very, very powerful. So maybe I can just load up a question. So when you look at this, one of the things I noted just in doing my research, which I found to be really interesting, I've already pulled it into one of our clients, actually, a scenario. Can you tease out for me what it means to you guys about like what a modern day middleware would be, right? And how, because in some ways, the way you describe this and the way I went and looked at it, this is sort of what I've been looking for, right? That isn't sort of that historic monolithic middleware. And I used to sort of poke at my teams because they used to develop what you would call middle apps, right? I mean, actually trying to use middleware to do things that it wasn't supposed to do. And then you see things that break, and you go through this RCA process, and you find that people were misusing middleware. What you guys have appears to me to be super powerful in what I would call like this next generation of middleware. Am I missing something, or is that a thing for you guys?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. I only talked about the design time before, but the real magic comes in the runtime, which is really where I think the middleware deployment is important for web scale, applications and anything that's being developed within and across platforms. And that's the runtime itself. So when you have a runtime that can be deployed anywhere, instead of becoming middleware, tongue in cheek, I call it sort of anywhere, WARE. And I know and I say tongue in cheek because, it's funny, and I like to play on words because words are fun. But realistically, applications, there's no canonical definition for what an application must be. And the way I like to look at Boomi is if I have a service, a process, a sub-process, that includes, complex or simple integrations, that includes all sorts of different design patterns for networking in between those endpoints, I want to deploy my runtime accordingly. I want to be able to scale that runtime any way that's necessary for that application to service its, end goal, whatever that outcome is, whatever that experience we want to generate. And when you can design centrally, but deploy anywhere, and you can deploy anywhere however you want to me, that's really where the essence of a modern-based middleware system needs to be. And that's really where we made a bet a long time ago, or the founders made a bet a long time ago, that web scale would take off at some point, and that there needed to be an architecture that could bridge like legacy, Java applications and Java-based web applications with anything new that would come out on the market. And so to have a place where you could centrally, create, deploy, manage your environments, and then have a multitude of options available to you and how you deploy the runtimes for different types of environments, you could create what we now call composite applications. And so those composite applications can consist of endpoints located anywhere on any platform, connected by runtimes that are designed to essentially handle the transactions between those different endpoints. And you can deploy as many or as few of these runtimes as you need to in your environment and still centrally manage everything. So that's what, in my opinion, is going to allow web scale to occur in a very meaningful way. Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, what I would say, what I get excited about is when I'm able to say, hey, what about vendors, right? So you have folks that maybe don't have the capabilities. So the idea of placing out an agent, right, for them, instead of enabling EDI or some process maybe that they're not capable of, you can have this really tight integration and even enable a subtenant, make it revenue creation, right? And find ways to enable all of your ecosystem, wherever it is. And the other thing I'll note is whether it's a Raspberry Pi or it's 200,000 transactions a second, that technology enables those pieces. So very, very powerful in how it can take it to that next level, right? That, there's the concept of hybrid integration platform. Wherever that technology is, we're going to be able to place it there. And I think that's incredibly important, particularly when you're dealing with maybe a local database and something in the cloud. How do we combine those two? And how do we build that composite something that needs to access all those resources in a way that makes sense? Because remember, if you're in a database, you don't want to be crossing data centers, right? You want to get that, you want to be able to process right where it needs to be processed. And that's really the power. And the fact that you can do it with ease, in a centrally governed way, yeah, it's industry leading. It really makes that, days and weeks versus months and years to get your projects done.
So that's interesting. And kind of, to me, bridges up, an idea or a concept around digital transformation. And Boomi, so Boomi, I think you guys would be like really a key component of a company's journey really to further modernize. How should I think about kind of this legacy? And when I look at this slide, it's a really powerful slide because I see a lot of logos, a lot of things that I have that some of them may be modern, but some of them may not be modern. Some could be progressing to a modern technology architecture. And then some of the people listening today may say, I'm really on a more aggressive journey, or I'm on a slower journey to that digital transformation. How does Boomi kind of fit into that toolbox for those of us that are kind of in this transition, if you will, or even have legacy? I mean, I could see this could fit really even in a you could modernize a wraparound legacy I think, right?
Exactly.
So, what do you think about that, Sean? How does that?
Well, no, and that's where again, how can we take the legacy portions of our business that, whether that's an AS400 that, it's taken 20 years to get rid of. We said 20 years ago we were going to get rid of it, but it's still around, right? How do we come up with ways to really enable that data and maybe even take it to the next level where it's not just that we're integrating the data, but that we're synchronizing it, right? As mergers and acquisitions come in, we need to maintain two separate sets of data. How do we do that in a way that isn't heavily customized on both ends? It's that kind of thing. What can we do to really enable this data? Because unfortunately, as much as we want to get rid of legacy fast, particularly in the large organizations that have 15 years of COBOL development, that's not something you can replace within a year, right? It just doesn't, unless you're throwing quite a bit of resources at it, it just doesn't happen overnight. And so finding ways to enable it, to put it to the cloud, to really get the best of breed, wherever that is inside of the cloud, we make that easy, right? And, integration can be tough, but how can we make the integration part not the problem, right? It's understanding the business, understanding where the data is, and then finding out best ways, with best practices to make that data where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I'll just, add to that as well. Sean, you said something that I think is really important. One of the reasons we've all been in IT for, on this panel, I would presume for more than a couple of decades now.
Right.
And we've also seen, we've seen IT successes and IT failures, but invariably, at least from my point of view, where the IT success typically occurs is when you have business and IT alignment, and that's through the whole entire process. And that's typically humans first, and then the tech follows.
Right.
Sort of that's where that goes. And one of those areas, I'll just show one more slide here. We created a conceptual framework around a pragmatic data strategy, and shameless plug, here it comes. This is in my book called Modern Enterprise Data, published by Dell Technology. Anyway, the idea is, we have this concept called integrated experiences inside of Boomi. And this stack isn't like a definitive, you must have these things in order to have a pragmatic data strategy. No. It's a conceptual framework that's really meant to align both IT and business and say, okay, there's a common set of things that are necessary in order to create an integration across clouds. It starts out with an infrastructure that can really be anywhere. And if you have something where, if you have an integration portfolio at your disposal that can plug into anywhere, that's step one. Cool. We've got that down. You can have a multi-cloud environment. Now, what do we want to do at the top first and then work our way down? So what experience do we want to invoke? Do we want to create an immersive experience, an evocative type of experience? Is this a human user that we're going to talk to, or these automata that we don't really care about what the experience of the human is, but we care about the speed with which we want to deliver whatever type of payload to those automata so that they can perform their duties as quickly and easily as possible. And oh, by the way, if it's also that, do we want to make sure that it's trusted data that we're giving to those automata so that ultimately in their particular pipelines, they can achieve their respective outcomes? Well, if we start with the experience, whether it's human or machine, and we work our way down, we kind of come up with this framework which says, okay, I've got some sort of subjective experience at the top. And this subjective experience is going to guide how we're going to design our pipelines going forward. And notice I'm using the word pipeline now instead of integration. And the reason why is because, in my view, when you have a set of resources that are interconnected, regardless of where they're located, now you change the script on saying we need integrations to we need a pipeline to give us this particular experience at the end. And this is how we're going to then measure it at the business level. So if I'm creating a human experience that evokes some sort of feeling about a product, can I measure that? Can I measure that with a click count, a hover over time period? The amount of customer sat issues that either increase or decrease relative to some variable that I'm adjusting, some dependent variable that I'm adjusting. And if I can measure that outcome quantitatively, and I can measure the experience qualitatively, now all of a sudden, I know how to design my pipe. So I start with connecting at the infrastructure layer to whatever endpoint, wherever it's located. And then I want to understand the data that's in that endpoint. So I might want to discover that data. I may want to catalog the metadata and look at the relationships between a data source and a data sink. I may want to have some way to understand what is the context of that data, or how to harmonize that data relative to some lightweight way to master that data that I'm now discovering. And then I may want to prepare that data for a pipeline that's relevant to the pipeline and nothing else. And if so, then I need to find out how my networking patterns are going to lay out. Do I want a singleton, or do I want something like a pump sub queue, which is becoming more and more pervasive in an event-driven type of architecture for web scale applications and services? And then what kind of data services and controls do I want to put on top of that? And is each of these services and is each control measurable in some quantitative way? And if I can figure out how to snap all of these together and have an integration platform that gives me all of the tooling to be able to do this, then theoretically I should be able to cut my time down on delivering from IT to the business what the objectives are. And the business should also have oversight as to why I'm developing what I'm developing.
Got it. Good stuff. Hey, just a technical thing. I know a couple of people sent me notes. So we got the three speakers, three panelists, and then it's set so that whoever's talking, I think now I'll be live and the rest will show up. But I think once you stop sharing your screen, it'll all track back. So just to get that word out for everybody. I think, can you see all three of us now? So just send a chat if you see us okay. So we're all coming in good. Hey, just real quick too, because it was in the center of your slide there. And this is obviously, with many of the SINC roundtable discussions that we do and the thought leadership conversations that I have a chance to moderate. And I've done a bunch of these around the globe, and certainly I actually started doing them in person again in some places, thankfully, which is why I'm here calling you from Atlanta, Georgia, because people are, starting to kind of see us in person, other than my hometown of Austin, Texas, which seems to know a lot about the Dell brand there locally. But on security, how do you guys tease out your security posture, and how can the audience sort of think about security in light of all the data? Because obviously there are some companies that we've been reading about and in the news, and data security is super important. And it really isn't a question of if you get hit, right? It's really just a question of when, and then how. And so we're constantly worried about data and security. How do you guys unpack the data security question at Boomi?
Well, all right. I was just going to say, one of the things I love about that runtime is we can place it wherever it needs to be. So Boomi will never see your data, right? So if you have your, very stringent requirements, we can absolutely support those. But then, of course, we have our own very stringent sets of security if you want to use our data centers to do those runtimes, right? So and we can talk about, some of the things that very different is, our SOX 1 audits and those kinds of things we can get those to you in their full form. And the reason we give them is because we are very successful, right? We've put a lot of effort into our security apparatus. And, but like I said, a lot of folks, the reason we can function in this kind of easy to use, easy to deploy way in large enterprise is because they, number of people have their PII data and need to control it. And they want it on premise and they don't want Boomi ever to see it. And of course we can support that, so.
Good, okay.
Yeah, and then, to extend that even more, the deployment of the runtime is one area. Even if you're running in cloud native applications, if you have a VPC or some sort of virtual private network of any kind in a hyperscaler environment, runtimes are deployable there too. So
right.
The boundaries of security, it's also there. So you deploy how you want to. The other thing is, from an API standpoint, if you want to govern the amount of interaction that a consumer would have coming into a particular service that you expose through an API, that's also something we can provide as well. And there are many other facets of security. It really depends, Rob, on what type of security you're talking about.
Yeah.
And from the design time, that's a secure environment. Runtime, secure environment. API management through API gateways, that also creates areas of potential breach that can be mitigated by the proper security protocols, which we can provide. And so it really depends on what the security based outcome is. But the cool thing about, I think, what an iPaaS solution, and I say iPaaS, integration platform as a service, the one cool thing about modern middleware in general is that the good, the leaders in this space are going to have a multitude of different ways that you can protect your environment. And Boomi is always focused on improving security, because you're right. Everybody's going to have their day of reckoning at some point. It's not we constantly have to keep on our toes so that our customers, our 16,000 customers, are serviced well, and they can trust the tools that we give them.
Yeah, the best thing about being sort of semi-retired, I guess, is that I don't. I get to provide the support right on this end instead of being in the firing line. But the code back in my house was boil the coffee. Whenever it was boil the coffee, we knew that something was going down, right? And there would
The
be
secret word.
Yeah, because those are things you really can't explain too loud, especially if you're a public company kind of. So that was our rosebud word. So boil the coffee. Hopefully not too many people have to boil coffee anymore, but we know it's just gotten to be just a happy way to go at data, because data just is sort of the new money, right? Everyone's trying to monetize data, and the bad guys know, and they get the hold of data, they can do these ransom attacks and then hold these companies hostage. And it's really sad, but further proliferation is happening. But a question on the edge. So you guys, you touched on it earlier, Bachman. Again, something that's near to my heart. So that I want to kind of get into that. But before I kind of think about that, and I kind of let that one linger and see if the audience has anything around that too. But what are like in the use cases that I've been used to in wireless and mobile, and now that this edge and 5G is coming, we're selling more and more of these devices. And all that's going through retail and a lot of retail outlets, right? So surprisingly, when I was in wireless, I spent most of my time in retail, like retail systems. You wouldn't think about it that way, but we're selling phones and we're selling rate plans. And so you really are about retail. I know you guys have some favorite use cases. I'm wondering, and I think retail might be one. I'm kind of leading the witnesses here, if you will. Because I just kind of wonder, because that's sort of been really thick in my career. But do you have other than maybe retail could be one of them? Do you have some favorite use cases that for everyone you could just sort of touch on for us, so we could kind of walk through the shoes of a use case, if you will?
Sure. I think in terms of patterns as opposed to specific use cases, because in the world, I try to generalize patterns across different use case domains in different industries, right? So, Shauna, I'll turn to you for some generalized answers here. Let me set a stage real fast. it's my opinion that that designing what we call IoT today will be a general pattern for any data going forward.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to get everybody that I talk to in my circles in the habit of designing massive scale at the edge, because that's a source of data generation that we're going to have to deal with at web scale that we cannot possibly fathom. I mean, I'm seeing things that are coming out in 2023, 2024, where if we're not prepared for the ingestion of signal relative to noise out at the edge, and really be able to handle thousands of transactions per device per second, this is going to be this is going to be a wake-up call for a lot of integrators and integration providers out there, let alone app builders and all of that. And so that said, if we think in terms of all of the applications that are on a smart device that fits in your pocket today, and we think about that as the modern data center of 2023 or 2024, and we start to design as if we can deploy these runtimes at elastic scale out at the edge, and then use something like edge-based computing vis-a-vis AI to determine what signal is versus noise is, and then put the signal in a certain spot to persist that data along its journey to wherever that pipeline leads next. To me, that is a generally good thing to do. To get super specific relative to retail, I'm thinking of something like point of sale systems in general. A point of sale system today, you've got a register up at a counter. You have a customer that brings clothes up there, and then scanning one by one each of the elements in the customer's hand, just say with brick and mortar, clothing retail. I don't think it's a far off thought. Indeed, if we think about commercials from 10, 15 years ago, where you have a person who walks into a convenience store with a trench coat and starts loading up his pockets with
right.
merchandise and walks out having paid for everything instead of having stolen it. Well, there's a lot of tech involved in all of those transactions. Not only where that person is in the store, but also where each item is in the store as well. And then when they pass a certain threshold, to make sure that the appropriate funds are debited from that person who has walked out with the 17 goods that are now sitting in his trench coat. Yeah. That is not an easy problem to solve, but it's one that I think we have to be able to solve. And we certainly have the technology to be able, from a camera-based perspective, to recognize, who the person is, what the object is, where its original location is at a certain point of time, where its location is going to be at different intervals throughout the grid, three-dimensional grid of the environment. But that gets incredibly complex if we don't have the right tools to be able to execute an event-based transaction system. Now that we have all of this technology, it's a matter of using it appropriately. So we're getting there, in other words, but that's one area that I see. If we learn how to design simple systems today, where we're bringing all of our clothing to the register as if it were an IoT system, we'll be ready for tomorrow when all of these geospatial, event-based position state changes of positions happen in the environment. And that involves a flexible runtime at the edge, probably a scalable pub sub somewhere in between. That's an event-based architecture that's checking in every second as to the position and velocity of the movement of the object itself, and then tracks that until payment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you.
That's good. Well, I have a really good use case. It's a global Chinese food restaurant chain. And as you can imagine, what happens is you have systems that are new and some that are old, right? And they pivoted to an only to-go location, right? They're used to having full restaurants. They wanted to go to a full to-go location. And so in order to do that, you had to enable some of the older systems along with the new systems in order to kind of connect all these things together. And really that's what they were able to do within, with a staff of one or two, right? They put together this entire initiative to make it so that they could make these things happen, and winning awards and making things happen. And that's how they were able to do it. And they had their struggles, right? Getting the right information to the right systems, and then COVID hit, and that hit everybody, right? So it was that ability to pivot and make things happen. And one thing I get excited about too with the platform is this, the economies of skill, right? So we've talked all of those things that Bachman talked about. We have platform.boomi.com, right? So imagine integrating people and the edges and, the APIs and all the things that need to happen. It's not just computers. Sometimes it's human integration, right? So how do we do those things and tie those things together? And that's how they were able to do it and leverage similar skill sets, right? So the same guy building the APIs is the same guy doing the EDI, is the same guy, building the master data management of the data, is the same guy that's doing the user interface to make it so that someone can access this information, a human, right, to get approvals to menu changes, for example. But those are the types of use cases I think that make a lot of sense. And again, weeks and days, not months and years, right? And that's why we got to work. Otherwise, it's on to the next initiative, right? Rob comes up with a new idea, and 6 months later, and the old idea is gone. So we need to make sure we're moving in a very agile way.
You captured my whole career in that statement right there.
That's what happens.
So I mean, those are really interesting use cases, and I appreciate you weaving in the IoT and the retail all at once. That's a very clever way to do it. So now, so one of the things that we all like to think about when we purchase or we start to onboard new technology is what are the first best next steps, right? And then how should we think about bringing Boomi in and then kind of launching into a project? Just a thumbnail, like how do customers start working with you, and then how does that kind of evolve into a more I would say enterprise level deployment?
Yeah. So the nice thing about being in the office of the CTO is where the art of the possible meets the reality of the feasible. That particular intersection, we dream big, but then we're governed by reality. So in the workshops that we do, typically it starts out as a business layer conversation with stakeholders, and technical leader stakeholders are in there as well. So we can hear, what everybody wants. So the business will have all of these bright ideas about, the milk and honey that they want to produce for their particular, world of unicorns and fairies. And then the technologists will be in the room saying, we don't have that. Here's what you can deliver. And then we sort of build out through a design thinking plan what we can accomplish reasonably. Mm-hmm. And we start making our trade-offs at that particular point. And what I like to do is get everybody using the same vocabulary by the end of a workshop personally. So if somebody says, you know what, Bachman, I loved what you talked about with the position and velocity thing with the objects in the convenience store. Let's implement that. And then we have to say, whoa, what do you have today? What's your as-is state? And what's your desired to-be state? The clearer those things are, that's a great starting point. The other things that play in are, do we have tech debt or don't we have tech debt? So is this a greenfield project or something that we're going to have to actually get information on? Yeah. Because that will govern what can be done. And honestly, a specific example in the enterprise that I see day in and day out with massive organizations globally is, I want to take everything that I built on premises and I want to put it in the cloud. Because, well, the cloud. Mm-hmm. And that is a recipe for failure. As you know, being a CIO, I'm sure you have admonished many a vendor or an employee just saying, hey, you might want to not do that because it's not a recipe for goodness. You can't take this COBOL system and throw it into the cloud and expect it to work, as an example. So those are the things when we know what our piece parts are to start out with, then we can build from there. But what I like specifically is modeling what's going on in the real world environment, what the business wants, what the technologists have, come up with a path in a user story, and then define what the enterprise architecture will look like in big boxes and lines, and then go and develop from there. And then that's usually when we define what those pieces look like. That's when I want to bring in people like, advisory engineers and distinguished engineers like Sean Aker and say, hey, how are we going to actually achieve this? Yeah. And then Sean, I would turn it over to you at that particular point.
Right. And then really my job is to make sure that I understand what's there and then get to what success means, right? What we don't want is buying too much software or too little, or, trying to over-engineer and under-engineer what's there. Our goal is to get what makes the most sense. And what I would say is I like the quick wins. So what can we do that's the low-hanging fruit of the organization? And where are we seeing the most problems? SLA problems, revenue facing issues. What can we do to make sure that we get to those outcomes and get everybody to a strong ROI? And that's the goal. And I say we're super common with mergers and acquisitions, or implementations of large ERP and other workflow applications like Workday and Salesforce and others. We're changing that paradigm, really being part of that data as a service strategy. I think being part of those pipelines to make it a streamlined, straightforward way to do it. One thing I think I get excited about is because many of those products have integration tools involved, but we're agnostic, right? And I think that can be really important, particularly because unfortunately, the business isn't going to choose one technology to do everything, right? And I think it's really important that we find the best way in and get to those quick wins. And then what we see is once we've seen how easy and straightforward it is, it just lights on fire, and it proliferates because of how easy it is to use. And sometimes the tools themselves, instead of building a lot of customizations or using a bunch of Python code that's hard to maintain and manage, you can get to a couple of people running the integration stack and designing it in such a way that can be really easy to get things out and build them. And really that's my job. So
great. Well, we come to the end, gentlemen. Super interested in your continued success. I mean, this really a powerful platform, very impressive to see. And thanks for the exchange, really very informative. Again, thanks to everyone for joining today. I'm looking forward to being part of the Boomiverse, and I'll be looking out for those sonic boomies out there too, right? The big noise that you all are going to be making in the marketplace. So great, and always great to have another SINC event that you guys again like to participate in as well as I do. So it's great. And so again, thank you to everyone for joining today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again here in the online and also in person soon.